All right, are you guys ready? We're going to go through the top 15 questions that we get asked as realtors, and I'm going to do my best to answer them off the top of my head as I go through them with you. So let's start off with number one. How do I prepare my house before I sell it? Well, I go through this often with my sellers. Whenever I see a property, it's quite often it's not ready for the market. People are living in the house. They've got their kids, they've got their hobbies, they've got their entire life just, living their life in that house. And that doesn't really translate to being the best property for the market. So, number one, always declutter. Get everything out of the house that is not necessary. I mean, furniture is one thing, right? But all the knickknacks that are on top, the gifts that you got from your friends, the gifts you brought back from vacation, the unnecessary art that is, just hanging around. You don't need any of that stuff. Keep it as minimalist as possible. That would be number one, the easiest thing you could do. If you feel like your house needs to be painted, definitely invest in some paint. That is one of the lowest cost things that you can do. Painting a wall, that will improve the value of your house. If you need major repairs like new roof, new windows, furnace, you'll probably get more for your house if you do those things before listing. It all depends on what type of market you're in. Sometimes you can be in a very strong seller's market and buyers won't care that the roof needs to be changed in a few years. They're competing against 20 other buyers, and whoever's willing to deal with it will just deal with it. But if you're dealing with a buyer's market where there's a lot of inventory and you need to make your house stand out, then yes, you do need to take care of those bigger items before listing. It will just attract more buyers to your listing. Unless you're willing to list your house at a discount and say, hey, I don't want to deal with this roof. I know it's going to cost me around 18 grand to get the roof reshingled, but I'd rather list it for, 380 as opposed to 410. So you're giving a massive discount to the buyer to bring them to your listing compared to the other ones that are already all fixed up. Here in Ottawa, we do have options for you. We do have access to lending companies that will lend you up to $60,000 to do the renovations. So let's say that your house needs a furnace, some windows, and some new shingles. Like, we can get you a loan for that, and you don't need to pay anything up until the day you close it. So it's just a lien that's put on your property. You get the cash, you pay the contractors, and on the day of closing, you reimburse that lien plus interest. You'll end up with more money in your pocket if you can attract more buyers and get a higher sale price. So it's a win-win-win. Win for you, win for the buyer. It's easier to sell, so it's a win all around. All right, let's move on to question number 2. How long will it take to sell my home? Well, currently here, May 2023, we're sitting at around 25 days on market. Some houses are going in as little as 24 hours. Some houses are taking a bit longer. I've got some listings that sold this week, 4 days on the market. Some other listings, they've been sitting on the market for 3 months. And it's all a matter of what is the appetite for your product. I'd say in a healthy, balanced market, if your house is priced well, it will take about 30 days. And that's just a blanket statement for what the market will offer as far as quickness to close. Now, that's when you get the offer. Take 30 days, more or less, to get an offer, but the buyer won't move in right away. Oftentimes, they're either renting or they got to sell their own house, and typical closings are anywhere between 60 to 120 days. So from the day that we meet, we might not even list the house that night. Obviously, you need to get it ready for the market. We need to come back for photos. So when I meet a seller, we might sign a listing agreement and have the house on the market only in 2 weeks. It could take 30 days to sell. And from there, it might be 60 days to the closing. So we're dealing with 90 days and 2 weeks. So that's 3 months and a half in order to close the quickest possible, or even longer, 5 to 6 months. the quickest closing that I've ever seen was 10 days. So that is a buyer that's very hungry, probably a house that's vacant where the sellers don't need to move out or they're in a rush to move out. And you can close on a house as quickly as 10 days, but typical closings will usually be anywhere from 60 to 120 days. Okay, number 3. What should the list price of my home be? Well, we're falling into evaluation territory here. What we use in the real estate industry quite often is called a CMA, comparative market analysis. And what that means is we compare your house to other properties that have been on the market. Now, there's different types of property statuses that we can look at. We can look at listings that have been listed and have expired, so they did not sell. We can look at properties that have sold already in the past, and we can look at active listings, currently listed actively on the market. And all those are good indications as to what your home price should be. And the way we go about it, we look at your property, we identify the main factors of your house. Is it a 3-bedroom house, 2-story, attached garage, double car garage, yard that's 100 feet in the front by 200 feet depth? Are you connected to municipal sewers? Are you on a septic system? Are you on a well or municipal water? We look at all those factors and we go hunting for essentially what would be the twin house to your house, the house that is the most identical in location, identical in all the features. And then we look for expired listings, sold listings, and active listings that are very identical to yours. We never find an identical match. It's very rare, unless it's like a cookie cutter house, like a townhouse with like no upgrades. But oftentimes we'll find properties that are similar, and then we'll attribute a difference in value for the extra bedroom that your house has versus the other one. We could throw on an extra $10,000 there. And that adjustment part is a bit more subjective. That's why sometimes you'll have realtors come to your house and say, oh, I think your house is worth $500,000. And then you'll get another realtor and he'll say, oh, I think your house is worth $550,000. Now, my job as a real estate agent is to get the most amount of money possible for you, highest and best use for your property. And that's what we do when we evaluate properties. We look for the best outcome for you. If I'm representing you, you're my client. Now, if I'm representing the buyer and I'm representing them as a buyer agent, it's the opposite, right? I try to look for other houses that have sold for less than your list price. So it all depends on who we're representing. There's an objective price where it's going to be, okay, this house will sell anywhere from 400 to 500, but within that range, it's always negotiable. There's a subjective part to it in that range. All right, moving on. Number 4, why is my home's assessed value different than the market value? Well, the bank is there to loan out money. And if you've been seeing properties sell in your neighborhood for around $500,000, and it's really a hot market, it's unusually hot. The properties are going because there is zero inventory. The bank will loan up to 80% of your assessed value. And they don't want the bank appraisers to look at a recent sale that is completely out of whack, meaning that it's not in line with what has been selling in the market recently, and say, well, this house is worth $500,000 because other houses on the street have recently sold for $500,000. They might say that that's a one-off, or they got lucky with that sale, and they might be more conservative with the assessment value because the bank is protected by the equity that is in your house. The equity is the difference between the value of your house and the loan amount on your house. So let's say you have a $100,000 property. The bank appraised it at $100,000. They will only loan you out 80% of that, so $80,000. You might be able to get $120,000 on the open market, but the bank doesn't really trust that number. If you get it, great. But for them, the assessed value is different than the value on the open market. Hope that makes sense for everybody. All right, moving on. Number 6, when is the best time to sell a home? Well, the best time to sell a home is when it's the right time for you. A lot of people try to time the market, and unfortunately, too often they end up getting burned. Oh, I won't list my house over the Christmas holidays. I'm going to wait for the spring market in 5 months. When May rolls around, there's more buyers active. Yes, that is true, but there is also more inventory that is active. There's a lot of people that think just like you, oh, it's the middle of the holidays. I won't list my house because houses typically don't sell in December. They sell more in the spring. Yes, that's all right, but it's all relative to how much inventory is on the market. A lot of people try to time the market, and it's very difficult to do. My advice to clients is try to do it for when it's the best time for you and your family. Typically, the spring will bring more buyers, and this spring it's very busy. We don't have a lot of inventory. But, next spring might be different. We might have a flood of inventory and, not as many buyers, and people might find it more difficult to sell their property. But in the middle of January, December, there's not that many houses for sale, and the buyers that are out there are serious. Because if they're shopping in December, January, there's a reason they're in a rush to buy a house. So there really isn't really a good time in the year to sell a house. There are hotter times as far as buyer activity, but the inventory could fluctuate also, and that could affect your price. So for me, sell when the time is right for you and your family. Let me grab some water. There you go. I'm talking a lot. Yeah, I like doing these Q&As. It's fun. Hopefully next week I'll have a guest on the podcast. One of our top performing realtors, one of my colleagues is scheduled to come on. So we've been meaning to have him on for the last few weeks, Kevin Feely, but the schedules that just didn't line up. So hopefully I'll have him on the podcast in the next few weeks. Okay, number 7. Should I buy a new home before selling my old one? This is a catch-22. If you want to buy your next house without selling your current one, be prepared to carry 2 mortgages. And what I mean by that is that you might buy a house and your closing might be in 2-3 months. That's great. You think you'll have time to sell your house, but what if you don't, What if you can't pull it off? You can't pull off the sale and you can't get the buyer to close on your house before you close on your new one. You're going to be stuck with 2 mortgage payments. And for some people, that's fine. They can handle it. They've got enough income coming in. But for some other families, it might be a bit too much. They might be biting off a bit more than they can chew. So my advice to you would be to look at your finance. If you're comfortable buying without selling, then do it. I mean, you've got more negotiation power, but if you can't and you're not comfortable carrying 2 mortgages, you can always draft up what is called a first refusal. That's a conditional offer upon the sale of your own house. Typically, sellers will look down on those versus somebody that doesn't have a house to sell, because you're sort of saying, Mr. Seller, I'd like to buy your house, but I do need to sell my house before I buy yours. So this is an offer, but we'll see how the sale of my house goes. And sellers, they want to deal with buyers that are determined to go through with the transaction no matter what, should they sell their house or not. And you'll lose a bit of negotiation power if you submit a conditional offer. Another thing you could do is sell your house, and once it's sold, then you go buy the next property. But that's also dangerous, and I'll tell you why, is because sometimes you'll sell your house. Congratulations, you got the buyer lined up, closing in a few months, and then you'll go hunt for another property, and what do you know, there's no longer the inventory that you're interested in. So you might be forced to buying something that you don't really love, or you might be forced to be homeless. You'll have to go rent a hotel room or move in with family. Nothing wrong with that, but maybe that's not the the lifestyle that you wanted. But I've seen it happen before, where people find themselves, not having the property they want to buy being available on the market. So that's a catch-22. Buy before you sell, or sell before you buy. It's different for every client. Number 8, how does my agent get paid when selling a house? So there's no set fee on the open market for real estate agents. I think it would be a violation of RICO rules, of the body that governs me and my license here in Ontario, to even talk percentage points, to say, it's between this percentage and that percentage. Typically, it is a percentage of the sale price. And, there's going to be averages in your area. But my advice to you would be, talk with the realtors. Ask them for their track record. It's not true that the guy that's charging you less is going to save you more money. It's not true that the guy that's charging you more is going to give you a better service. You want to ask the realtor, okay, well, what is your fee and what are you providing for that fee? And are you able to sell houses quickly? Have you sold lots of houses in this area? Keep in mind that the commission cost when it comes time to selling your house is just, it's an expense, right? And the realtor that's able to sell your house for $250, but is charging you a bit more commission, versus the guy that's charging a cheap commission, but can only get $200,000 for that house. Yes, you might be saving money on the commission, but the guy that's charging you a bit more is getting you more money in your pocket. So it's all relative. It doesn't really matter what the realtor is charging you, as long as they're bringing home results for you and your family. All right. So that's as much as I can talk about commission on this podcast. But if you want to have a conversation about commission, feel free to reach out. You can give me a call and we can talk about it one-on-one. Number 9, how much does a seller pay for closing costs? Well, a seller typically does not have a lot of closing costs. There is the real estate commission, right? That is a big chunk of change there. But there's no land transfer tax for sellers. There's no inspection fees for sellers. There's no, septic inspections. There's no inspection fees at all. The buyers typically pay for all of those. The seller will only have to pay their legal fees, so the review of a lawyer to close a deal. That's in a seller's market where, the sellers have the power. But it's quite possible that in a buyer's market where there's a lot of properties for sale and not a lot of buyers, the buyers will have a bit more power and they'll say, hey, Mr. Seller, when I close on this house, I want you to pay my land transfer tax, which is roughly about 1.5% of the sale price here in Ontario. I want you to pay my closing fees, my lawyer fees. I want you to pay my inspections. So once we're in a buyer's market, that can switch around and all of the expenses could be put back onto the sellers. I haven't seen that in a while. I've been selling real estate for 17 years. I haven't really seen it at all, but everything's negotiable. I could see it go the other way if the market gets really, really bad, but we're not expecting to see that in the next few years at least. All right, so number 10, how much of the sale price do I get? Well, it depends. As a seller, you'll get the full sale price minus all your expenses, which we talked about. The commission, the real estate lawyer fees, and that'll be pretty much your only expenses. If you're selling an investment property, you'll have to pay income tax on that. If it's your primary residence here in Canada, you don't need to pay any taxes on that. So you get to keep 100% of the funds, which is really, really cool. Number 11, how can I save money when selling a home? Well, it's not about saving money. It's about maximizing your return. And like we talked about, if you can paint a bit, paint one room that really, really needs it, and it costs you $300, but it gets 2 buyers interested in the property as opposed to 1, you might generate what is called a multiple offer because you spent a bit of money on the sale of your house. And, that $300 versus you not spending it, you'll end up with more money in your pocket. Other ways to save money would be trying to sell the house yourself without using the services of a realtor. Obviously, that comes with its own set of challenges. Realtors do really have access to the most amount of buyers out there. They have access to the best buyers because the best buyers want to work with realtors that have access to the most amount of properties. And if you sell it yourself privately, yes, you'll save the commission, but you might be robbing yourself of being in a position where you have multiple offers on your house, and the fee of the commission will be unimportant when you look at the price that you can get by listing with a busy realtor in your area. All right. Number 12, should I pay my buyer's closing cost? I believe that right now we're in a seller's market and there's no real reason to pay for your buyer's closing cost. If you want to get buyers interested in your property, I suppose that it would be a good way of making it happen. Recently, I've been dealing with sellers that don't have a mortgage on the property, so they're offering to pay to give the buyer financing options. So they're willing to finance the buyer at a lower interest rate than the bank would do because the seller doesn't really need the cash. I suppose that if you said on your listing, the seller will pay all your closing costs, you could potentially get more buyers, but that's not a tactic that I've seen in the market recently. But it would be an interesting one to explore. 13, do I need a home inspection? As a seller, you probably don't want to do a home inspection. The buyer will do one regardless. And if you're in a seller's market, sometimes buyers will come in and they won't even do an inspection at all, which is stress-free for you. Buyers do need to beware. You know, if I was representing a buyer, I would say, hey, maybe we bring an inspector with us to the home showing, just so he can point out anything that's obvious. We're not doing a full on inspection, like 3 hours top to bottom, but at least we're getting a good idea of what's going on with the house. But as a seller, I would probably stay away from doing inspections right now, doing pre-listing inspections, because quite frankly, you just don't need them. And yeah, that's the case. Number 14, what are common bank required repairs? There's not that many bank required repairs. I've seen insurance companies ask for wood stoves to be brought back up to conformity, make sure that they're not a fire hazard, or else they won't provide you insurance for the property. And if you don't have insurance, well, then that's a problem for the bank because their mortgage is no longer insured. I've had banks request that we provide a clean water sample before closing. That's important. Banks want to know that there is potable water available on the property. Other than that, I haven't seen the banks ask for any other repairs other than those two. So wood stoves worry the insurance companies. That are a problem for the bank, and clean potable water. I've also seen septic systems actually be requested to be repaired before closing for the bank. How can a real estate agent help me sell my home? Well, we've talked about this quite often on this channel. Realtors have the biggest pool of buyers out there. When buyers are looking for properties, they are calling advertisements that they see in the newspaper, on social media, as they're driving by signs. They see billboards with the realtors, and the realtors are really collecting all of the great buyers in your area. And what they're doing with their buyers is they're educating them on the real estate market. They're getting those buyers to meet great bankers. They're getting those bankers to pre-approve those buyers, making sure that they're ready to go, ready to buy when the time comes. They're getting those buyers introduced to home inspectors. They're getting them introduced to real estate lawyers. And they're really creating this ideal buyer that you want access to. If you're not dealing with a real estate agent and you're selling your house privately, there's a good chance that you won't get access to these A-quality buyers that are already working with other realtors. There's the MLS system where realtors post up listings that they've got signed, and then other realtors in the area want to sell those listings because there's a cooperating agent commission being offered by the listing agent. And it's a system that's been around for decades and decades, and it's a well-oiled machine. It's organized real estate. It works well for buyers. It works well for sellers. If you want to go and save the money and not hire a realtor, you just won't get access to the best buyers out there. And that's the reality of the situation. So how can a real estate agent help you sell your house? They get you access to the best buyers. And it's going to be the realtor's, your listing realtor's job to bring that property to the market in the best light possible. Teach you how to stage it. Teach you how to organize your house in a way that it appeals to the most amount of buyers out there. And also hire a photographer. Get the house, looking bright, looking clean. Obviously, you have to clean the house also. But and then they post it on the MLS system, and then they advertise it on wherever their medium of choice is. Some, realtors list on social media only, and that's like rocket fuel for their business. Some of the older realtors that I know, they still advertise in print advertisement. For me, it's not my bag. It's not really working these days. I'd rather boost a listing online than, spend money on a newspaper. Some people are just great networkers. They have tons of networking events. And realtors get their buyers from all over the place. There's no real one set way to do it. Everybody's got their own way. And there you have it. That is the top 15 questions that a selling agent would be asked. And I hope I did a good job answering for you. I hope it gave you a bit of an education here on what to do, maybe what not to do. But obviously, real estate is a very hyper-localized thing, and I'm giving you advice for the Ottawa, Ontario market. And if you're in anywhere else in the world, you might want to call one of your local realtors and ask them a question. If ever you want to hop on a one-on-one call with me, you can always go to callwithmarty.com. I'll take half an hour. It's completely free, and we can go through your questions, and it would be my pleasure. So next week, what I'll do is I'll cover the top 15 questions that you would be asked as a buyer agent when you're representing a buyer. All right, so that'll be it for me today. I will catch you guys on the next video. Ciao for now.